March 14, 1948, 3:22 a.m. Vincent Mangano stood in the freezing rain outside a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn, staring at the body of his younger brother Philip. The coroner would later say Philip had been dead for 6 hours, 3 bullets to the chest, execution style. But Vincent knew the truth the moment he saw the positioning of the body, the way Philip's hands had been bound with wire, the single playing card tucked into his jacket pocket. A message. Philip Mangano had been killed by someone inside the organization, someone who knew the old codes, someone who wanted Vincent to know this wasn't random violence. This was a statement. Vincent pulled the playing card from his brother's pocket, the ace of spades. In the language of organized crime, it meant one thing: your partner has turned against you. Vincent looked up at the 3 men who had brought him to the warehouse, his most trusted capos, men he had worked with for 20 years. "Which one of you," Vincent asked quietly, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him, "belongs to Albert Anastasia now?" Nobody answered. They didn't need to. The silence told Vincent everything. The man who had helped him build the Mangano crime family, the man he had promoted from soldier to underboss, the man he had trusted with his life, had just declared war. And what Vincent Mangano would do in response, the systematic destruction he would orchestrate over the next 8 months, would force the commission to rewrite the rules of organized crime forever. To understand what happened in the warehouse that night and in the months that followed, it is necessary to understand who Vincent Mangano was in 1948 and what his relationship with Albert Anastasia had become. Vincent Mangano was old guard. He had started in organized crime during the early 1920s, working his way up through the ranks during Prohibition. By 1931, when Lucky Luciano established the commission and reorganized New York's 5 families, Vincent Mangano was chosen to lead one of those families. He was respected, methodical, conservative in his approach to criminal enterprise. Mangano believed in rules, in structure, in maintaining the traditions that had governed organized crime for generations. He ran gambling operations, loan sharking, and labor racketeering. He avoided unnecessary violence. He maintained good relationships with the other families. He was, by the standards of his world, a reasonable man. Albert Anastasia was the opposite. Anastasia had come to America from Italy in 1919, jumped ship in New York Harbor, and immediately gravitated toward violence. By the mid-1920s, he was working as an enforcer for the organization that would eventually become the Gambino family. Anastasia was a killer, not just willing to murder but enthusiastic about it. He enjoyed the work in a way that made even other criminals uncomfortable. When Luciano established Murder Incorporated in the early 1930s, the enforcement arm that carried out hits for the commission, Anastasia became one of its primary operators. He personally participated in dozens of murders between 1931 and 1940. He was efficient, ruthless, and completely loyal to the idea that violence solved problems. In 1931, Vincent Mangano needed a strong underboss, someone who could handle the enforcement side of operations while Vincent focused on strategy and politics. Anastasia was recommended by several members of the commission. Vincent was hesitant. He recognized that Anastasia's appetite for violence could become a liability, but he also recognized that in the restructured world Luciano was creating, every family needed muscle. Vincent made Anastasia his underboss with one explicit understanding. Anastasia would handle enforcement, but Vincent would approve every significant action. No unauthorized hits, no independent operations, no decisions made without Vincent's knowledge. For 17 years, from 1931 to 1948, this arrangement functioned. Anastasia carried out Vincent's orders. He protected the family's interests. He maintained discipline among the soldiers. But underneath the surface, resentment was building. Anastasia believed he was doing the real work while Vincent took credit. Anastasia believed his willingness to get his hands dirty made him more valuable than Vincent's political maneuvering. And most dangerously, Anastasia believed he could run the family better than Vincent could. By 1947, this resentment had evolved into something more concrete. Anastasia began having conversations with other family heads, testing the waters, seeing if anyone would support a move against Vincent. He spoke with Frank Costello, who controlled significant political influence. He spoke with Joe Bonanno, who valued strength over tradition. He spoke with Carlo Gambino, a rising captain who understood that power in organized crime was shifting toward younger, more aggressive leaders. The conversations were careful, coded, hypothetical. What would happen if Vincent Mangano stepped down? What would the commission do if new leadership took over the Mangano family? Would that be seen as a coup or as natural evolution? The responses Anastasia received were calculated. Nobody explicitly endorsed removing Vincent. But nobody explicitly opposed it either. In the world of organized crime, that ambiguity was permission. January 1948, 3 months before Philip Mangano's murder, Albert Anastasia made his decision. He would not ask Vincent to step down. He would not wait for Vincent to retire or die naturally. He would take the family by force. But Anastasia was smart enough to know that killing Vincent Mangano directly would be problematic. Vincent was respected by the commission. He had relationships with all 5 families. If Anastasia simply had Vincent killed, the commission would view it as destabilizing, potentially requiring retaliation to maintain order. Anastasia needed a different approach. He needed to isolate Vincent first to weaken his position, to make his removal seem inevitable rather than aggressive. The strategy Anastasia chose was methodical. He would turn Vincent's own organization against him. Over a period of 3 months, Anastasia began having private conversations with key members of the Mangano family. He offered promotions. He offered larger percentages of operations. He offered respect and recognition to soldiers who felt Vincent was too conservative, too cautious, too stuck in old ways of doing business. Anastasia presented himself as the future. Vincent was the past. By March 1948, Anastasia had secured the loyalty of at least 12 key captains and soldiers. These men understood what was coming. When Anastasia made his move, they would support him, not Vincent. But Anastasia needed one more element. He needed to send a message that was unmistakable, that would demonstrate to the entire organization that power had shifted. That message would be Philip Mangano. Philip was Vincent's younger brother and his closest advisor. Philip handled day-to-day operations while Vincent focused on larger strategy. More importantly, Philip was beloved within the organization. He was fair, generous, and loyal. Killing Philip would accomplish 2 things. First, it would emotionally devastate Vincent, making him less effective in the immediate aftermath. Second, it would demonstrate that Anastasia could strike at Vincent's inner circle without consequences. The soldiers would see that and understand that protecting Vincent was no longer safe. March 13, 1948, 9:30 p.m. Philip Mangano received a phone call asking him to come to a warehouse in Red Hook to resolve a dispute between 2 captains. Philip went alone, trusting that this was routine business. He walked into an ambush. 3 men, all Anastasia loyalists, were waiting. They restrained Philip, forcing him to his knees. One of them asked if Philip had any final words. Philip understood immediately what was happening. He asked that Vincent be told that this was not Philip's fault, that Philip had been loyal until the end. Then they shot him 3 times in the chest. They left the body where it would be found, placed the ace of spades in his jacket, and made an anonymous call to Vincent's residence providing the warehouse location. Vincent arrived at 3:22 a.m. and found his brother dead and his organization compromised. The 3 men who brought Vincent to the warehouse were the same men who had killed Philip. Vincent recognized this the moment he saw their faces, saw the lack of surprise or anger, saw the careful distance they maintained. These men were no longer his. They belonged to Anastasia. Which one of you belongs to Albert Anastasia now? Vincent asked. The oldest of the 3, a captain named Anthony Coppola, finally spoke. All of us, Vincent, most of the family. Albert has 20 men ready to move. If you fight this, it becomes a war. People die. Families get destroyed. The commission gets involved. Vincent stared at his brother's body for a long moment. Then he looked back at Coppola. Tell Albert I want to meet tomorrow. Neutral location, just the 2 of us. Coppola seemed surprised. You are not going to fight. Vincent's expression was unreadable. I'm going to do what is right for the family. Set up the meeting. March 15, 1948, 2:00 p.m. Vincent Mangano and Albert Anastasia met in a private room at a restaurant in Manhattan. No bodyguards, no witnesses, just 2 men who had worked together for 17 years now sitting across a table as enemies. Anastasia spoke first. Vincent, I did not want it to go this way, but you have held this family back for too long. We could be making twice what we make. We could control more territory, but you are too careful. Too afraid of conflict. Vincent listened without interrupting. When Anastasia finished, Vincent spoke quietly. You killed my brother to prove a point. You turned my own men against me. You have violated every rule of this organization, and now you want me to step aside so you can take what I built. Anastasia nodded. Yes, that is exactly what I want. And you are going to do it because you know that if you fight me, you lose. I have the soldiers. I have support from other families. You have nothing except your reputation, and that will not stop bullets. Vincent was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket. Anastasia tensed, expecting a weapon. Instead, Vincent pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. What is this? Anastasia asked. Open it. Anastasia opened the envelope. Inside were photographs. The first showed Anastasia meeting with an FBI agent in a parking garage. The second showed money being exchanged. The third showed documents being handed over. Anastasia's face went white. "These are fake," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "They are not fake," Vincent replied. "You have been talking to the FBI for 6 months. You have been providing information about commission activities. You have been positioning yourself as a potential informant in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Every conversation you have had with Agent Morrison has been documented. Every payment has been recorded. Every document you provided has been copied." Anastasia stared at the photographs. His mind was racing, trying to understand how Vincent knew, how he had obtained this information, whether it was true or an elaborate bluff. "It is true," Vincent continued, reading Anastasia's thoughts. "You believed you were being careful. You believed your FBI contact was discreet. But I have known about your arrangement since it began. I have been documenting it because I knew eventually you would make a move against me. And when you did, I would need leverage." Anastasia looked up. His hand moved toward his jacket. Vincent did not flinch. "If you kill me," Vincent said calmly, "copies of those photographs and full documentation of your FBI cooperation go to every family head in New York. They go to the commission. They go to every soldier in this organization. Your reputation as a loyal soldier disappears. You become what is most despised in our world, an informant, a rat. You will not survive 48 hours. Anastasia's hand stopped. He had built his entire reputation on loyalty, on being the enforcer who never broke, who never talked, who would go to prison before betraying the organization. If proof emerged that he had been talking to the FBI, that reputation would be destroyed. Every man who had supported his move against Vincent would turn against him. The commission would authorize his execution. He would become the very thing he had spent his life claiming to despise. "Here is what is going to happen," Vincent said. "You are going to leave New York. You are going to disappear for 6 months. You are going to sever all contact with Agent Morrison and the FBI. After 6 months, if you have remained silent and caused no problems, you can return. You will no longer be underboss. You will be a soldier again. You will rebuild your reputation from the bottom. If you refuse, if you try to fight this, the documentation becomes public immediately." Anastasia was trapped. He had planned for violence. He had planned for political maneuvering. He had not planned for Vincent to have evidence that could destroy him completely. Anastasia stood. His face was a mixture of rage and humiliation. "You think this is over? You think you have won?" Vincent looked at him with something close to pity. "I think my brother is dead because you wanted power you were not ready to handle responsibly. I think you have learned that violence alone does not build empires. And I think you will spend the next 6 months considering whether you truly want to return to this life or whether you would be better served finding a different path." Anastasia left without another word. Within 24 hours, he had disappeared from New York. The soldiers who had supported him were confused, then concerned, then terrified when word quietly spread that Anastasia had been compromised. Nobody knew the exact details. Vincent made sure of that, but whispers circulated. Anastasia had made a mistake. Anastasia had exposed himself. Anastasia was no longer reliable. The transition of power happened quickly after that. Vincent Mangano announced that his underboss had stepped down due to personal reasons and that a new leadership structure would be implemented. He promoted several loyal captains. He redistributed territories. He made it clear that the family would continue operating under his authority and that anyone who had concerns about his leadership could bring them forward directly. Nobody did. The soldiers who had supported Anastasia saw what had happened to him and understood the message. Vincent Mangano had neutralized his enemy without firing a shot, without creating a war, without destabilizing the organization. He had used information as a weapon more effectively than Anastasia had ever used violence. But the story did not end there. 6 months later, in September 1948, Albert Anastasia did return to New York. He requested a meeting with Vincent. This time, when they met, Anastasia was different. The rage was gone. The ambition was tempered. He asked to be reinstated as a soldier, nothing more. Vincent agreed, but with conditions. Anastasia would never again hold a leadership position in the Mangano family. He would operate under direct supervision. He would have no independent authority. Anastasia accepted. For the next 3 years, he operated as a soldier, rebuilding relationships, demonstrating loyalty, trying to rehabilitate his reputation. It was humiliating for a man who had once been one of the most feared enforcers in New York, but it was survival. In 1951, the situation changed again. Vincent Mangano disappeared under mysterious circumstances. His body was never found. Albert Anastasia, who by that point had successfully rebuilt enough political support within the organization, was appointed head of the family by the commission. The official story was that Vincent had been killed by external enemies. Most people in the organization suspected Anastasia had finally gotten his revenge, but nobody could prove it. And by 1951, Anastasia had learned from his mistakes. He had eliminated Vincent without leaving evidence, without creating a situation where documentation could be used against him, without giving anyone leverage. Vincent Mangano had won the battle in 1948. He had successfully defended his position using intelligence and strategy rather than violence. But Anastasia won the war by learning from his defeat, by understanding that patience and careful planning were more effective than aggressive power grabs. The irony, of course, is that Anastasia's leadership of the family lasted only 6 years. In 1957, he was assassinated in a barbershop by rivals who used the same tactic against him that he had once attempted against Vincent. Violence without political support, without commission approval, without the careful intelligence work that could have protected him. Vincent Mangano's revenge, such as it was, came from teaching Albert Anastasia a lesson that Anastasia never fully internalized. Power in organized crime is not about who is most willing to kill. It is about who has the best information, the strongest relationships, and the patience to use both strategically. Vincent understood this. He documented Anastasia's FBI contacts. He gathered evidence. He waited for the right moment to deploy that evidence. He neutralized a threat without creating chaos. Anastasia understood violence. He knew how to eliminate enemies physically, but he never truly understood that sustainable power required more than fear. It required trust, intelligence, and the ability to outthink rather than outfight your opponents. 7 people died in the immediate aftermath of Philip Mangano's murder, as Anastasia's supporters were quietly eliminated or forced out of the organization. The restructuring of the Mangano family in 1948 created a template that other families studied and emulated when dealing with internal conflicts. The lesson was clear. If you are going to move against leadership, you must have more than muscle. You must control information. You must understand what your opponent knows. You must be prepared for the possibility that the person you are targeting has been 3 steps ahead of you the entire time. Vincent Mangano was not the strongest member of the commission. He was not the wealthiest. He was not the most politically connected. But in 1948, when his own underboss tried to destroy him, Vincent proved that intelligence and preparation could defeat ambition and violence. Philip Mangano's death was the price of that lesson. But the lesson itself reshaped how succession conflicts were handled in organized crime for the next 2 decades. If this story demonstrated how power really functions in organized crime, how intelligence matters more than force, and how proper planning can neutralize even the most dangerous threats, subscribe to this channel for more detailed examinations of mob history. Like this video if you understand why Vincent Mangano's strategy in 1948 was more sophisticated than most people realize. Comment below with your perspective on whether Vincent should have eliminated Anastasia permanently when he had the opportunity, or whether his approach of rehabilitation and reinstatement was strategically sound. The next video will examine how Carlo Gambino orchestrated the 1957 assassination of Albert Anastasia and took control of the family using the exact same intelligence-gathering methods that Vincent Mangano had demonstrated 9 years earlier. That story connects directly to this one and shows how lessons in organized crime get passed from one generation to the next.